Hello, thank you for tuning in. This is episode 2 of Crunch Time Crossover. If you listened to the first episode and you are here for the second episode, I just want to say thank you so much. You guys all reached out, reposted everything I posted. Really means a lot to me. I got a lot of really good support from just everybody in the area. And again, I really do appreciate it. Both of my socials, like I had mentioned before, are over Easy Isaac on Twitter and Instagram. So if you have any comments you would like to say, any recommendations, things you would like to hear me talk about or discuss, I would love to hear about it. For these episodes, I had mentioned in the first podcast, I do want to start them off with some affirmations and just kind of keep that train of thought going. So first affirmation for the day is, I think the one I mentioned in the first episode, but one to never forget, is you are lucky to be alive today. There is a lot to be thankful for. Especially with what is going on in the world today. And, you know, something that I think is easily brushed over sometimes, but you are lucky to be alive. One of my favorite ones, again, is 1% better today means a lot. The mindset I try to keep going is slow motion is better than no motion. And as long as you're going in a good direction, you'll get there eventually. So just taking it day by day is really important. I feel like we get caught up with everything around us. You know, you have to make time for yourself and center, breathe, and take your time. You know, your pace is ultimately the best pace for you. So continue to move at that pace is very important. Some just really quick ones too. You're valuable. You're worthy of love. You're worthy of good things. You know, there's so many things that mean so much to you that I know you can think of that bring value to your life, and just really think about those things. Capitalize on those things. If there's something that you think you could bring value to more than what it is right there, I think that's really important to do. I think the environment that we live in really dictates a lot of our feelings and our actions. So assessing your environment is something that's always really important. Recognizing if there are people in your life that are pushing you to do well, people that support you, you want to keep those people around, and really drive home the idea that a good support system really means a lot to you and ultimately makes a difference in the life that you live. I myself can say that I'm very blessed for the people that I've chosen to surround myself around. And, you know, I think they ultimately strive for me to be 1% better every day. And I think with people around you that have those same kind of goals, those are easy goals that you can accomplish. I think that your needs are very important, and I hope you meet your needs every day. There are many things that you could potentially make better, and just small things that ultimately do mean a lot to you, to the people around you. We learn so much from ourselves, but just from the people around us that we decide to surround ourselves with. You know, your support system means a lot, and just, I think, making yourself a good support system ultimately makes yourself a good support system for other people. And, you know, keeping those people around really makes a difference in times like this where things are in the air. You know, there's a lot of people that unfortunately aren't with us now that started the year here, and you should just be thankful for the people that you can look around and you see that you can recognize. You know, that definitely makes a difference. Quality of life goes up, and ultimately living a good life should be the goal. I know that's a newfound goal that I've had in my life, and I'm going to continue to build on that. Like I said, with the people around me, with the decisions I choose to make, with the actions I choose to take. So yeah, again, if you heard this from me and you find that valuable, you should tell somebody that you know that didn't hear it. I think the energy you put out being yourself could easily be changed to energy you put out helping somebody and making a difference. You know, I think we get so caught up with ourselves, we don't realize that there's other people around us going through things that we could never really understand without a simple, how are you? Hope you're doing well, you know, just little conversation. So if you heard it from me, I hope you tell somebody else today. keep those thoughts moving, tell your parents, tell your brother, tell your sister, just anyone you find important to you that's in your circle definitely deserves to hear that today. And those are my affirmations for the day. I'm going to go to sleep with those, probably wake up with some new ones. So if you can think of some that mean something to you that you would like to say, do it, keep them going. I think I gain from them, they're things that I already know. They're just good reminders for the most part, and there should be things that you are aware of, and if you think you're forgetting, no harm in reminding yourself, simple as drinking some water, something to eat realistically. So yeah, those are the affirmations. To transition the podcast to the basketball oriented side, there's been a lot of news that has been coming in that I definitely want to talk about a little bit. I started the podcast the same as last week. I do want to talk about the Lakers just because some of the news that has come up has been very interesting, very detail oriented, I would say. The biggest one is Anthony Davis on that max extension for that 5-year. Definitely puts him in a different light as far as big men that have played for basketball, especially big men that have played for the Lakers organization. There's a winning culture that's associated with big men that sign big contracts, and now Anthony Davis is in that conversation. I think it definitely puts some pressure on him to perform. I mean, granted, they did just come off a chip, means the track record's already building, so it'll be interesting to see him build off of that. I didn't really talk too much about some of their acquisitions that they got over the offseason. I've spoken on a couple names, I would say the most common names, but some of the re-signs that they got were pretty important as well. I mean, KCP re-signed, who was up in the air for a little bit. I've always been a little bit of a critic of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's game, overall just being a 3-and-D player. I just never found him to be super interesting as far as quality guards go, but got it done last season with the ring. Happened to re-sign, so I'm sure they're going to get some good usage out of him. I know they signed Quinn Cook. Again, maybe not the most usage out of that kind of player, but just as far as having depth, backup, knowing the kind of system that they're in definitely makes that transition a little bit easier. The addition of Wesley Matthews definitely helps out as well. Being another 3-and-D player, definitely one of the better defenders in my opinion. Maybe not a guaranteed stopper as someone who can go out and get a stop, but definitely on the perimeter makes a difference as far as doubles go, maybe swing passes, and definitely trapping the ball. He definitely makes that defensive load a little bit easier on LeBron and AD, especially if they happen to get stretched out on the floor a little bit, which is probably going to happen this year. I think there's going to be a lot of shooting as always, but especially when you have players like Steph and Damian already talking about shooting the ball 30 feet back. It's going to be a long season. It's going to be a very long season. I also liked the number exchange. LeBron giving Anthony Davis number 23 to wear, and LeBron taking over number 6 to rewear for Miami is going to be really interesting. I know those jerseys are going to sell very quickly. I know that Nike's pretty stoked for the acquisition of that. And realistically, they're on a back-to-back now, back-to-back mentality. I mean, LeBron did it in 2012, so he knows what it takes. And I think with Anthony Davis signing those kind of big contracts, there is the implication of what's expected of him. So I know that he's going to really maybe not identify himself as the leader of that team, but he needs to start really proving that he is worth the type of money that they're paying him ultimately, because 5 years, 195 does look like a face of a franchise to me. Granted, LeBron signed a 2-year, $80 million contract, which is unbelievable to earn $40 million a year, but that's kind of what you get when you're the king, realistically. And I had spoken off recording with Anthony about Dennis Schroeder really trying to step into the point guard position, starting point guard position at that. And in my opinion, I believe Dennis Schroeder was the best point guard coming off a bench in the NBA in general. I think he could have started just about anywhere in the league. And when you have a team that just came off a chip asking for you in a trade, you need to establish yourself in a position like that you want to be there. And when you have someone like LeBron James and Anthony Davis on that same side of the ball, it really makes that position, not to say less difficult, but you really don't have to worry about as much as you think you would have to worry when you have two players that could easily go off for 35, 45 a game if need be. So those Lakers are going to be really real big problem next year. Both sides of the ball, they're going to be good. I think I mentioned it last podcast, but Pelinka needs to have the credit deserved as being one of the best off-season handlings I've ever seen for a championship team, in my opinion. Just some of those trades and acquisitions, as soon as off-season was announced, were just surprising for the basketball world, and I think he deserves his props in those regards. Another trade that happened that I do have a lot of interest in was that Russell Westbrook getting sent over to Washington for John Wall. I think was a big surprise to a lot of people. In my opinion, I think Russell Westbrook does more for a team than John Wall does, but I think realistically they're kind of the same caliber player, so it just kind of felt like a potential point guard swap. I think John Wall on that Houston Rockets team has more upside if they can manage to stay healthy. I think with the signing of DeMarcus Cousins, there is a history of playing there with John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins both playing together at Kentucky. So they may be able to get into a little groove with each other. I mean, a couple years ago, those are both top 5 players in their respected positions, minus the injuries. And if you were to add James Harden to that list a couple years ago, that would be a pretty nightmarish 1, 2, and a 5 to go again. So granted, with the injuries that have taken place, if they can slowly find a way to get a good identity on offense, that team may actually hold out on the West pretty well. Christian Wood is a good addition into that team, and I think I had mentioned last podcast, he does similar things that Clint Capella does as far as running the floor, getting open for lobs, second chance points, and especially with Boogie, they're two really big men, something that Houston definitely lacked over the last couple seasons, playing a really small ball oriented offense. They may really do some damage late season. Those second chance opportunities mean the world to a lot of players. I mean, I think LeBron won his first chip off of a second chance opportunity coming off of the right before Ray Allen's jump shot to seal that series. So that'll definitely be something that's really interesting. As far as the Washington side, I don't know what Washington really gained. I look at Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal and just see two ball-heavy guards, in my opinion, both guards that really need the ball at more often than not. So it'll be interesting to see how they mesh. I think Russell Westbrook helps Bradley Beal get over that hump. So I do believe that they'll probably be a playoff contending team, but I don't know if anything's going to happen past the first round, depending on the matchup that they get. That Eastern Conference is looking a little bit more of a problem than it has in year past. I don't think there's 3 or 4 clear-cut teams that there has been recently. I think there's a lot more talents evenly dispersed in the East. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But Washington just doesn't really seem to have a lot, in my opinion. Russell Westbrook definitely makes it a playoff team. I would be surprised if they missed playoffs with Russell Westbrook there and Bradley Beal, especially if they stay healthy. I just realistically don't see them going anywhere past the first round. And on Washington as well, too, their head coach, and Scott Brooks, was the head coach of the Thunder back in 2012 with Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Kevin Durant. So Russell Westbrook already has some history there. So maybe Scott Brooks is going to be able to appeal to him a little bit better, maybe change the rhythm of the offense that Russell Westbrook is accustomed to try to get Bradley Beal a little bit more incorporated, because I do think Bradley is going to have a hard time adjusting to not as many touches, because even when John Wall was playing, Bradley Beal had the ball in his hand more often than not, especially with John Wall just being a really pass and move kind of point guard and not a set up an offense, dictate couple high screener rolls and a pass. So it'll be interesting to see how they play. Again, nothing more in my opinion than a first round exit. So that'll be interesting. I know John Wall's last game was sometime in December of 2018. So almost a good 2 years of not playing a game. I know DeMarcus Cousins has missed a little over a year now, and basketball shape is playing basketball. So if they're not playing, they might have a little bit of a hard time getting used to this game, or more used to just how the game has sped up, I would say. But looking forward to seeing Westbrook. I mean, I'm definitely a Westbrook fan. I've been a Thunder fan for a while. I liked Russell Westbrook at UCLA, and I think he does get a bad rep just with the way he plays. So hopefully looking to see him salvage some of the career that's there. I would love to see him end up with a chip. Some hardware at some point would be really nice, especially for, again, a caliber player like Russell Westbrook. And if James Harden can stay away from the strip clubs like he's been doing over the past week or so, Houston might be in some good space. I know Houston hasn't had Harden for at least 2 workouts now, and they seem pretty confident that he's going to play, but I mean, he's at the club. So maybe not just yet. Yeah, just throwing some bills. As far as league news goes and not team oriented, the league did announce that they will be fining teams for players that decide to opt into load management, especially for their nationally televised games. I believe the fine was upwards of $100,000 for teams if they decide to sit players on, like I said, nationally televised games. I don't know if that 100,000 makes too big of a dent as far as money goes, but it is some incentive to have players play when people want them to play. I mean, if you look at it from a business standpoint, if that's their job and you don't show up for a big day at work, there should be some form of fine there realistically. So I guess it makes sense. I know the league is trying to compensate for the just lack of revenue they've received over the potential last season. And then I'm assuming they're anticipating not really having any fans, maybe for the entire season. I know the season's supposed to end sometime in June, so that's probably what they're looking at. So it'll be interesting to see how they recover financially. I know the league did announce that they're giving each team around $30 million and so to protect for financial COVID losses, I believe. So the league is doing their best to accommodate for most of these teams, and it'll be really interesting to see if players do still decide to sit out. I believe they are allowing for some leeway in the beginning portion of the season. Granted that a lot of teams that were late in the bubble, I mean, I want to say the season ended December in mid-December and season starts mid-December. I mean, season ended mid-October, forgive me, and starts mid-December. So almost 2 months, not a lot of time. So I know there's a lot of teams, at least the all-star caliber players that were the ones that were performing well in the bubble are probably going to get a lot of time to rest. So first month or so of season may not have too much all-star action as far as players go, but still a lot of really competitive games. With the lull that happened in between last season, I think players are really eager to get back onto the court and play. And with the just new state of the world, it's their opportunity to make a statement for their team if they want to do well. There's a lot of young talent out there in the league specifically, so I think the league is going to have there's going to be a lot of leeway for a lot of these young players to do really well. Also for the season too, we're looking at a 72-game season that starts on the 22nd. Preseason's starting in the 11th, so still a couple days for preseason. I want to say preseason's a little bit over a week long. So a couple preseason matchups that are going to be pretty good. I don't know if there's going to be a good gauge for how well teams are going to do, but it'll be interesting. I know this is just typically regular season, a good time to see a lot of the rookies play. So it'll be interesting to see how they decide to warrant playing time before season. I know you have to really be ready to compete just at the start of the beginning of season. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. For Christmas, there's a lot of really good Christmas days matchups. One of them, Pelicans versus the Heat. I know the Warriors are playing the Bucks. the Nets are playing Boston, which will be a really good game. Dallas and the Lakers, and then you have the Clippers and the Nuggets going at it again. A couple predictions. I think the Heat are going to beat the Pelicans. I think it's going to be a close game. I think the Heat are going to end up on top. The Warriors playing the Bucks. I'm going to have to go with Golden State taking that game. I think Milwaukee's going to play well, but I think Golden State may have a couple games to get a little rhythm going, and I think they may end up ending up on top. For that Brooklyn-Boston series, I would love to see the Nets win on Christmas Day. If Kyrie Irving, especially Kyrie Irving, playing against that Boston team that he was traded from, a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. So if he performs well, I think that'll be a pretty big confidence boost segueing into the new year. The Mavericks and the Lakers, I think I'm going to lean with the Lakers on this one. Luka's going to be potentially MVP this year. The way he was playing near the end of last year was just unbelievable, especially in the bubble. And I think he's already, just a little GOAT. I think he's already had that kind of impact for a team. So I wouldn't be surprised if Luka's already an MVP conversation kind of early on. And for that Clippers-Denver series, I think just for the laugh, I'm going to go Denver. I would love to see the Clippers lose on Christmas, if I'm being honest. If they were to drop the game to the Nuggets, that's a huge confidence drop for the Clippers, but boost in the Nuggets. I feel like the Nuggets haven't had a lot of conversation going on as far as the postseason goes, so it'll be interesting to see how they recover. A lot of the teams I feel that have happened in the bubble that were competing near the end of the bubble, I haven't really heard too much going on. Haven't heard a lot of news from Miami. Haven't heard a lot of news from the Nuggets. Like I said, the only team that I can think of that's been a topic of conversation are the Lakers, and whether that's good or bad, I mean, I think if you're an LA fan, that sounds great. And if you're not, you're probably tired of hearing about it. So listen accordingly. So far this season too, I definitely just have a couple of preseason predictions, or just early, maybe way too early predictions for the end of the season, but just want to throw them out there. I think at the end of the season, the best team in the league in the West are obviously going to be the Lakers, and I promise this isn't a Lakers podcast. I'm not a Laker fan, but if I'm just being honest, just they're definitely, they've done the most as far as preseason goes, and I definitely think, like I said, best team in the West. I think the best team in the East, I would love to see the Nets end up as number one in the East. I think both Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving have a lot to prove. Maybe not the biggest chip on their shoulder, but for Kevin Durant more specifically, I think he needs to win a ring while being the focal point of a team. And it's, again, he won Finals MVP on the Warriors, but when you have Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, not to say you're not the focal point, but you have a lot of options, and I think that's why they won. Is you can never have not have enough options. So those would be the best teams. Overall, I think the best team in the league is going to be the Lakers. I know the Bucks last year were the number one team in the league with about 56 wins to the Lakers 52. So I wouldn't be surprised if that switched. But I can definitely see the Lakers being the number one team. For the worst teams in the league, I know the Cavs were the worst team in the league last year. I'm not going to pick them because I feel like that's low-hanging fruit. But if I had to throw out a team, I'm going to say the Bulls are going to be the worst team in the league next year. From the last bottom four teams, they were only separated by about 3 or 4 games. So that's not a lot of wiggle room for any of those teams. I know the Knicks are down there. I don't think the Knicks are going to be that bad, but I can definitely see just the Bulls making their way to that, maybe not the worst team in the NBA, but definitely the worst team in the East. For my worst team in the West prediction, it pains me to say this, and it took me how to think about this one, how to go over that West, just because all of those teams now have contending potential to contend for at least a playoff spot, in my opinion. And if I go down, last year the worst team in the West were the Warriors. Definitely not going to be the case this year. I definitely think they may be pushing for playoffs, especially if Kelly Oubre Steph, Draymond Green, and James Wiseman get in a good groove, that's a pretty good 4-man rotation in my opinion. And I think they would definitely do some damage. So I don't think they're going to be in the same position. But I do think that the worst team in the West will be the Timberwolves this year. I think they're only going to be worst because they're going to lose a lot of really close games this year. I don't see them closing out very well. I see them having a lot of competitive games, but I just don't see them really closing out, in my opinion. I think they're going to establish themselves kind of early on as one of the worst teams in the league, which I think is going to allow for a lot of talent to get a lot of playing time. So they're going to be able to showcase a lot of potential for a lot of players, hopefully try to get some value out of them. But ultimately, I don't think they're going to be, I do just think that they're going to sit at the bottom of the West, unfortunately. But I think the West is going to be a lot closer. I know last year the Warriors only won 15 games. 2 seeds above them, they were at 30 games, so they were separated by 15 games. That's not going to be the case this year. I think it's going to be somewhat similar to maybe within 5, but definitely see Minnesota taking that last spot. For my most surprising team that I'm looking forward to watching, other than the fact that they have a fair amount of nationally televised games, but I think if the Pelicans can put something together while being on TV, I think they're going to get a lot of recognition and a lot of love. Hopefully playoff bound with the young talent, but when you have Zion, who is what we anticipate to be one of the potentially best basketball players within the next generation of basketball players, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, really high flying. Lonzo, granted, I've never been the biggest fan of him at the guard position, does have a lot of room to grow, especially with Brandon Ingram being able to take a lot of that offensive load, I would say. And they were talking about they're going to be able to set some of the strongest and biggest screens in the league with Steven Adams at center and Zion at power forward. So I can't wait to see some brick walls going down. So I'm definitely looking forward to them playing. And then for I want to say my disappointing team, I'm not that I'm going to be disappointed in their play, but I just think the most underwhelming team this year as far as what's happened is going to be the Hornets. I think LaMelo Ball is in a position to where he's going to get a lot of playing time, a lot of ball handling, but he's stepping into a position that is really stacked at guard, 1 and 2 guard specifically. And I don't think he's going to have such an easy time transitioning just yet. I think he's going to find himself in a role in the next couple of years that he's going to be really comfortable in. I mean, he's a really sizable guard at his position, can definitely shoot the ball, pass the ball well, gets everybody involved, but I just don't think right now he's going to be able to do what people are expecting him of doing, especially, like I said, at that guard position where there's just so much talent across the board, East and West specifically. So that's going to be my, I want to say not disappointment, but just underachieving team for this year. Not going to be the worst team in the league. May even make playoffs in my opinion, but I think numerically as far as what they're able to accomplish over the season is just going to be really subpar in my opinion. Hopefully LaMelo can put something together over the next couple of years, but looking at that Charlotte roster, I just don't see anything that's super impressive in my opinion. So we'll just see what happens. Sometimes you got to be a tough critic on players that deserve the criticism, and I think LaMelo is a player that seems to be worthy of a lot of criticism. I am rooting for him at that position. I think if what LeVar Ball wants to happen, if all 3 of them can end up on a basketball team together, I think that would make for some pretty interesting basketball. I would love to just see LeVar react to that, in my opinion. I think as much as he says some outlandish and ridiculous things, he's an entertainer, and you have to appreciate entertainment when it's around. So that'll be very interesting. But as far as the ceiling that I'm looking at for Charlotte as of right now, I don't see it being anything impressive. And those were my predictions. I had mentioned me not being a Laker fan. I, for the record, am a Thunder fan. I have liked Seattle since, I say Seattle, around that time they transitioned to Oklahoma, so I've definitely been a fan since then. last season, I think I did opt into trying to be a full-time Kings fan. So I do watch the Sacramento Kings. I will pay attention to them. I hope they don't end up last in the West. But as far as talent goes, it is looking really tough out there. So I'm rooting for Sacramento not to be the last team in the league. I think that's my other ultimate goal, is Sacramento not ending up as the last team in the league. Shout out Purple and Black. But yeah, that was episode 2. I hope you heard something you liked. If there's something you would like me to talk about, please let me know. Again, if you listen to this and you're still here, I greatly appreciate it. And just to close out, like I said, you're blessed. You're loved. Today is beautiful. Tomorrow's beautiful. And just make some good improvements today for tomorrow, and just continue to do that, and things will continue to get better. My name is Isaac. Thank you for listening.